Hello, welcome to the Grow Your Wealthy Mindset podcast, where it is all about helping amazing physicians just like you create a wealthy life free from burnout and with the financial security to practice medicine on your own terms. I'm your host, Dr. Elisa Chiang. Hello, my friends and listeners, and thank you so much for being a listener of the Grow Your Wealthy Mindset podcast. When it comes to building wealth, you often hear the phrase multiple streams of income. The idea is to have multiple streams where money comes into your life so that if one stream dries up, there are others that are allowing money to flow to you. It sounds like a nice idea, right? Many people have one large stream of income, and that's their job. Some people have multiple jobs, which, while still trading time for money, can be looked at as multiple streams of income. After all, if one job goes away for any reason, then there are other jobs that still bring in income. It can be harder to juggle multiple jobs, and if you depend on your job for benefits like health insurance, then you generally need to work a minimum amount at that job. If you have one full-time job, the idea of picking up another job can feel exhausting, or really not even possible. If you do have a full-time job, what's something that you could do to build another stream of income? Well, that's where investments start. When you buy stocks with dividends, those dividends are technically a stream of income. When you buy bonds that pay interest, then that interest is a stream of income. When you have money in a bank account that pays interest, those interest payments are a stream of income. Of course, the amount that you're getting from those streams of income are probably relatively small and certainly nothing that you can live on. When you invest in real estate, the goal is to get passive income, which are additional streams of income. In today's podcast, I'm going to talk about another possible stream of income, which is filling out medical surveys. My idea for doing a podcast episode on medical surveys came after I saw a recent post in the Physician Side Gigs Facebook group with someone who made $3,700 this year doing online surveys, and the year wasn't even half over. I personally signed up with Sermo and InCrowd to do physician surveys many years ago when I first became an attending. There are a lot of surveys that I'll get invited to, but after answering some screening questions, I generally didn't qualify. I got invitations for surveys directed to ophthalmologists, but the most common topics seem to be for treating diabetic retinopathy or macular degeneration, or maybe for refractive surgery, which is things like LASIK. As an oculoplastic specialist, the only surveys I typically qualified for were focused on thyroid eye disease. From my personal experience, I would guess that surveys that actually have enough compensation to look interesting are from pharmaceutical companies looking at physician practice patterns for their expensive drug. Tepezza is a relatively new drug to treat thyroid eye disease. It got FDA approval early in my attending career, and a course of treatment cost over $100,000. The drugs to treat diabetic retinopathy and macular degeneration generally cost a few $1,000s per dose, and these doses are given every 6 weeks. Throughout this episode, I'll share my personal experience with surveys, as well as other information I found online about surveys. Given the post I read, it looks like it is possible to make a decent chunk of change doing online surveys. If this person made $3,700 in less than a half year, then $7,000 for a year sounds totally feasible. While that's not life-changing, it is enough to pay for a vacation. As I was looking at other articles about medical surveys, I came upon Dr. Ricky Rakala, or Rasella. I may be butchering his last name since I really don't know how to pronounce it. But he's a neurologist who wrote a blog article on the White Coat Investor website talking about how he made $30,000 in 1 year by doing surveys. I'll refer to his blog article during this episode, as well as put a link to the article in the show notes. Doing medical surveys brings in taxable income, so the downside is that you do have to pay taxes on it. But the upside is that you can actually set up your own business for doing medical surveys. If you are an employee at your day job, it can be extra advantageous to have independent contractor or 1099 income. You are able to open a solo 401k and make contributions, even if you're maxing out your current employee 401k. That's because you can contribute up to 20% of your profits to a solo 401k from the employer side of contributions. If you leave your job, you can then transfer your 401k or 403b to your solo 401k instead of a IRA, which allows you to keep doing backdoor Roth IRA contributions. You can also transfer any traditional, SEP, or simple IRA you may have to a solo 401k so that you can actually do the backdoor Roth IRA technique if that's what's been stopping you from doing so. And as a business, you can also open up a business credit card for the business, which is another opportunity to get more sign-up bonus points if you're into the credit card's points game. The other plus is the flexibility that comes with doing these surveys. You can do them virtually anywhere on your phone, though there are some surveys that may require you to do it on your computer. There's no long-term commitment with doing surveys, and they can be done in a relatively short period of time. Now that you may actually be interested in doing some medical surveys, let's talk more about what they are. Medical surveys are ways for companies to do research on a medical product, medication, or possibly a medical service. Marketing companies do all sorts of market research, including creating focus groups to get insight on what consumers think about a product or advertisement. Medical surveys directed towards physicians are looking for the insight that physicians may have on a product, or looking at a physician's opinion or a physician's current practice pattern when it comes to prescribing medications. As a physician doing medical surveys, the compensation is better than doing general online surveys. When you sign up with a company, you'll provide contact information and verify that you are a physician. They may ask more information, like your specialty, in order to send you surveys that are relevant to you. It's actually beneficial to give them as much information so that they can filter out what surveys they send, so you're not wasting a lot of time with surveys that you wouldn't qualify for. When you do qualify for a survey and fill out the survey, they will aggregate the data and send that back to the company who commissioned the study. So you don't have to worry that your personal responses are actually being sent. When you receive an invitation for a survey, it will typically say what the topic of the survey is and roughly how long it will take for you to fill out. Surveys can be short, like a few minutes, or they may take as long as an hour. It'll also tell you the compensation you'll receive upon completing the survey. If you feel like you have the time and the compensation is worthwhile, then you would click on the link in the email invitation and go to the survey. Each survey will start out with some screening questions, and if you pass the screening questions, then you'll be taken to the survey itself to complete. There are some surveys that don't actually pay you if you complete the survey. They just give you the chance to win something. And personally, I feel like these are a complete waste of time. I would actually encourage you not to do those surveys in order to disincentivize companies from ever making that offer. Doing medical surveys can potentially make a difference, and if anything, you may learn about new products or medications. After all, you are being paid for your time and opinion, which means that they value your time and opinion. Well, maybe they're not really valuing your time, but they're valuing your opinion and they realize they have to compensate you somewhat for your time. Medical surveys may be looking at how to market a product or medication, or even how much that they could charge for a potentially new product. There are many physician survey companies that are happy to fill up your inbox and invite you to take survey. Physician survey companies include Sermo, Cruzon, MS Global Research, All Global Circle, mPanels, Opinion Site, InCrowd, and ZoomRx. If you're a member of Medscape, you may also get emails about doing surveys. Some of those surveys are for Medscape research purposes, like physician compensation, and those don't typically pay anything. But I do think it's actually nice to fill out like the burnout survey so that we can actually see what the rate of burnout is each year. There are some Medscape surveys that do offer some compensation, generally in the form of an Amazon gift card. What factors determine how much you can actually make doing medical surveys? Again, from my experience, your specialty and what type of patients you'll see will be a large factor. Of course, my experience is limited, so I'm going to talk about Dr. Rasilia's experience. He's a neurologist who made $300,000 in 1 year doing medical surveys. And he attributes that the reason he was able to make so much doing medical surveys is that he sees a lot of patients and a lot of different types of patients. He's in a specialty where a lot of new drugs have come out, and he prescribes a lot of those new drugs. He says he also talks to multiple drug reps that advertise these new drugs and attends pharmaceutical dinners promoting new drugs. He admits to being a sucker for free food. And he also enjoys doing the surveys. Having done many screening questions, I definitely agree that seeing a lot of patients with conditions where you may be prescribing them new drugs is a recipe to successfully passing through the screening criteria. The screening questions often ask how many patients you treat a month or how many patients you treat for a specific diagnosis within a time frame, and even ask how many patients you prescribe a specific drug in that time frame. Many surveys are looking at what physicians' prescribing habits are currently, as well as what drugs they've heard of and what drugs they would consider using. Specialties that are more likely to make money doing medical surveys, other than neurology, are probably rheumatology, endocrinology, hematology, and oncology. I name these specialties because they're specialties where there are expensive new drugs becoming available, and so they would likely have a lot of medical surveys to do. After all, rheumatology prescribes a lot of biologics, and those tend to be quite expensive. Cancer drugs are notoriously expensive. Endocrinologists see thyroid patients, and so some of them prescribe Tempeza. And I can imagine that there are other expensive drugs to treat other endocrinology conditions. There may be other specialties that I know less about what drugs they're prescribing that may also be good, like GI or pulmonary. So if you are in a field where you tend to have a lot of new expensive drugs that are being developed, then doing medical surveys may be great for you. Dr. Rosala also states that he gets surveys for his opinion on promotional materials and his opinion on paid speakers and the effectiveness of pharmaceutical dinners. I don't think I've ever had that encounter, but if that's the case, then talking to drug reps and attending those dinners will really put him in front of the pool of people targeted for those kinds of surveys. If you are going to allow pharmaceutical dinners, then the meals you eat will get reported to a public database as part of the Sunshine Act. Depending on where you work, you may not be permitted to actually accept those meals. When I worked for a county hospital, I could not accept any gifts, so I couldn't go to any of those meals. Before that county hospital job, I worked at a private practice, and I actually did go to all the pharmaceutical meals I could in order to just meet other ophthalmologists and network in order to try to grow my practice. That's also the time frame where I was signing up for medical surveys. The compensation for doing these surveys is not so exciting that it's probably worth doing a task that you don't like. Dr. Wasila says that on average, a 30-minute survey will pay between $45 and $80. That's probably not worth using time that you could be spending doing something you actually enjoy. But if you find yourself waiting somewhere, then it may be a decent use of your time if there's not much else that you can do other than play games on your phone. Of course, the more surveys you do, the more you'll make, and probably the more invitation to surveys you'll actually get. It's also advantageous to do surveys as soon as you can after getting the invite. I've often gotten messages that the survey is no longer open when I click on an email that came a few days ago with an invitation. Once each study hits the number of responses that they are looking for, the survey will close. There are some caveats that will disqualify you from doing medical surveys, which happens during the screening out process. All of these medical surveys will start with a series of screening questions. There will be a screening question regarding on what setting your practice. There will be a screening question regarding in which setting you practice. And it may also ask you to put what percentage of your professional time is spent in each setting, with a long list of choices, including things like an academic hospital, a private practice, or an ASC. One of the things they may be looking for to disqualify you from doing the survey is if you work for the government. Another question will be what state your primary practice is in. They may ask this for multiple reasons, like they want a distribution across the country. But one thing that will disqualify you is if you practice in Vermont. The state of Vermont has a gift ban law, which makes it illegal for a doctor licensed in Vermont to partake in paid surveys. There'll likely be a question on how many years you are out of training. This screens out residents and fellows who are still in training. For these medical surveys, they want attending physicians. There will also be a question that's going to say something like, Are you or any member of your household currently affiliated with any pharmaceutical or healthcare manufacturer or providing consulting services in any capacity, including clinical investigator? In order to eliminate bias, neither you nor anyone in your immediate family can work for a pharmaceutical or advertising company in order to do these medical surveys. And the last routine question I'll talk about is regarding adverse events. I'm going to read you an actual question from a survey. We are required to pass on to the sponsor the details of any adverse events, including actual and potential adverse events or product complaints, etc., that are mentioned in the course of market research interviews. Should you mention an adverse event in a specific patient during the discussion, we will need to report the adverse event, even if you already reported it directly to the company or the regulatory authorities. The sponsor may wish to request further information from you. Please indicate below whether you consent to us disclosing your name, contact information, and adverse event details to the sponsor in such situations. The sponsor may also have to report the information regarding the adverse event to applicable regulatory authorities. You may choose to remain anonymous instead. This will have no impact on the anonymity associated with the study itself. After making that statement, you'll be given options like, yes, I consent to any patient safety events as described above being reported to the manufacturer sponsoring the study, and I consent to having my contact information provided to the manufacturer's drug safety department for follow-up. Or, yes, I consent to any patient safety events as described as being reported to the manufacturer sponsoring the study, but I wish to remain anonymous. Or, no, I do not consent to any patient safety events as described above being reported to the manufacturer sponsoring and wish to not proceed, in which case you'll be disqualified from doing the study. There may also be other screening questions that are more specific to the survey itself. Once you answer a screening question with an answer that disqualifies you, the survey will end and say that you don't qualify. Some surveys may also ask if you'd be willing to be contacted for more information. It's possible that you may end up being requested to do a telephone or Zoom interview. These will be scheduled at a specific time, so there is less flexibility about when you can do them, but they also tend to pay more. Dr. Vasilia states in his blog article that he usually gets paid about $300 per hour for a telephone or Zoom interview. I once qualified for a focus group that was not specifically focused on physicians, but I think it was focused on high net individuals, so it still paid relatively well. Unfortunately, I wasn't actually able to do it due to the times they were meeting, but it offered a few $100s for 2 hours. If after hearing all this information, you're ready to start taking surveys, then the first step is to choose if you want to use your social security number or get an employee identification number. If you want to open a solo 401k, then you will need to get that employee identification number. You can apply for an employee identification number at the IRS website. It's relatively simple and it is free. It really can be done in a few minutes. You want to treat your doing medical surveys like an actual business. It is recommended to get a business bank account and then route all the payments you have into that account. If you incur any expenses, you can use this account to pay for those expenses. You want to talk to your accountant about what expenses you could actually write off. Having this dedicated banking account will make accounting much easier, especially when it comes to paying taxes at the end of the year. And then, of course, you need to actually sign up with the different survey companies. It's probably best to sign up with all the companies because that'll give you the widest exposure to surveys, and it's free to actually sign up to get surveys. In fact, you could potentially earn money by being an affiliate or sending invitations to your colleagues to do a survey. If someone uses your link and completes a survey, then you'll get paid. I personally do have an affiliate link for InCrowd. So if you decide after listening to this episode that you'd like some extra income doing medical surveys, I'll have that link in the show notes. If you would like to support Physician Side Gigs, Physician on Fire, or White Coat Investor, I'll have their web pages in the show notes where you can sign up using their affiliate links. Once you're all set up, then you'll get alerts, typically by email, but I think you can also set it up to text you. I certainly don't want text for that, but maybe you do. So you'll choose how you want to be notified when a survey becomes available. Some companies will pay after each survey, while other companies will hold your compensation until you reach a certain threshold. Medscape tends to pay with Amazon gift cards, but most other companies, I believe, pay with actual cash in the form of a check. It can take several weeks for that check to actually arrive in the mail. Remember, even if you don't get a 1099, this is still income to which the IRS expects you to report on your Schedule C. Since this is income on top of your current income, it will be taxed at your highest tax bracket rate. That's another consideration about whether it's worth it for you to do these medical surveys. Personally, I've stopped doing surveys. As an oculoplastic specialist, I'm typically screened out of surveys that's targeted to ophthalmologists. While prepping for this episode, I found in my inbox an invitation for a survey that, from the look of the screening questions, they were looking for an ophthalmologist that did refractive surgery. There was a screening question asking how many of all these different surgeries I had done, and I got screened out right after answering that. If I were making thousands of dollars a year doing surveys, then I probably would continue to do them since I actually don't mind doing them and rather like giving my opinion when asked. It feels like if they're actually paying for my opinion, then my opinion could potentially lead to some kind of change or affect someone's decision-making process. That wraps up another episode of the Grow Your Wealthy Mindset podcast. If you're pumped to do medical surveys, then this is a reminder to look at the show notes for the companies and affiliate links to sign up. With affiliate links, the person who is the affiliate will get compensation, but there's no cost to you. So it's a great way to support someone. I occasionally have affiliate links for services and products I personally use, which I do sometimes talk about on this podcast. And I do really appreciate whenever you can support me and this podcast, since it does actually cost money to produce this podcast. Thank you so much for being a listener of the Grow Your Wealthy Mindset podcast, and be sure to tune in next week for our next episode. If you enjoyed this episode, I would love it if you could share it with your friends and colleagues. And now for the disclaimer. I am not a certified financial planner, accountant, or attorney, and nothing I say should be construed as professional investment, tax, or legal advice. This show is primarily for your education and entertainment. I am a physician, but I'm probably not your physician. So if you need any medical advice, please contact your own physician. Thank you.